What's up, everybody? Once again, back here for spring football reports, talking about some XFL and USFL. There is a whole bunch of stuff to unpack this week, so we're going to go ahead and dive right into it. We're going to start with the week 5 review. Um, let's start with the first game of this weekend, which was kind of a shocker, I would say. The Houston Roughnecks at the Seattle Sea Dragons. Krish, let's start with you. What were your thoughts on this game?
I thought it was kind of stale, to be honest. Um, it just wasn't really a good game. It was kind of slow. Danucci didn't play too well. Danucci just a really on and off quarterback. I think Brandon Silver is really, really good this year. I think the offense, the pro style offense fits him really well. Pocket passer, can't move around. I was really hoping in the beginning of the season to see something from Ben DiNucci. I thought with Josh Gordon that connection was good, but as soon as he was getting mad at Josh Gordon for missing a route, which I don't know who that was on, because that was a weird play. I felt like that was on DiNucci, because Josh Gordon was nowhere near that ball. That was terrible miscommunication, and he was yelling at Josh Gordon to be off the field. I'm like, man, Josh Gordon the number one receiver in the league, arguably, right? And so why are you, asking for him to be off the field? That's only going to make him mad and not want to play for the team. So that's my thought on it.
That's completely fair. Give me just a second. Joining us is Anthony Miller from XFL News Hub. Thanks for joining us, Anthony. How you doing tonight?
I am good. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Excited to have you here with us tonight. You're definitely well known in the XFL community, so I feel like you can definitely lend us an opinion here on this game. Were you surprised by Seattle beating Houston?
No, I actually predicted that Seattle was going to beat Houston. And the reason why is because I don't think Houston's really been tested with good teams this year. They've kind of had an easy schedule to start out the year, so they haven't really been challenged. And I feel like Seattle was our first major challenge of the season, just because of how good the offense is. I mean, yes, granted, Ben DiNucci has been turning the ball over more than any other quarterback in the league, but that offense is still really good when it comes down to what Morgan Nelson's been able to do, Ja'Cory Pearson. I mean, that Josh Gordon, that team is so deep offensively and even defensively. Skipper's been a great D end off the line. Like they have a lot of talent on that team in Seattle. They have a good coaching staff. That was one where I think Houston had their first big challenge because the South Division, I mean, let's be honest, it's a pretty weak division for the most part. So this was really their first challenge of the year. And I think Seattle kind of caught them off guard, especially it was a short week, Thursday night in Seattle. That was kind of a tough matchup for Houston to really face up with. But you know what? It's an important game for Houston, too. I mean, they get their first loss of the year. Now they can kind of humble themselves. They can kind of move forward. So they were challenged. They know what they need to do to get better and that's to be a little more consistent offensively. And I think Houston will be able to bounce back from it. But I think it was an important game for Houston and an important game for Seattle as well.
I would completely agree. It was a game I did not expect Seattle to get. We've got a Facebook user saying, "Hi, Anthony," just so you're aware. And then, Michael, what were your thoughts on this game?
So first and foremost, Anthony, I want to say, hey, I don't know if you remember me not from AFN days before you joined the XFL News Hub or not. I don't know if you remember the interview.
Great.
Or the,
yeah. I do. It was 3 years
okay.
ago. It seems like forever ago, but great to see you, Michael.
Yeah. Nice seeing you too. For this game, I think this game was very telling. Like Anthony kind of touched a little bit on it. I think it was a very telling game across the board because I think Houston showed some cracks in the armor as far as who they are. The offensive line didn't look as promising as it had been through the first half of the season, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that Ron Zook's defense is playing excellent right now. Seattle, though, is not going to make the playoffs if they continue playing this style of football. I know it seems really weird at 3-2, but that defense is going to get gassed because they can't stay off the field. The offense is too turnovers. 13 turnovers by Ben DiNucci in 5 games is ridiculous. He was my honorary mention for that don't impress me much this week. He did not win it, but he was my honorable mention, even though he won his game at 21-14. But this was also a game I think that everybody here for the most part, that was here last week, kind of alluded that this could go Seattle's way. Like, we had the idea that Seattle could win this game because Houston hadn't been tested. They were on the road for the second time. The only other time they were on the road was still in Texas. So it was the first time they left Texas as a whole, and they had 3 home games against the South, which, again, the South is kind of looking very dreadful right now. So Seattle puts themselves in a good situation. They just need to figure out something with this defense, because this defense is going to get gas between the turnovers and how fast this offense moves. It's excellent for stats. It's not good for winning games. So hopefully they can kind of piece that together to kind of challenge St. Louis. I just think St. Louis is still a little bit more of a composed, complete team.
Well, I think one big thing that would help Seattle is if June Jones would just run the ball more. I think he needs to trust his running game a lot more. And he's got one of the best running backs in the league, Morgan Ellison. Yeah, and he's not utilizing him as much as he should. Yes, he's been a little banged up the last few weeks, so I totally get that. But I mean, the reason why Ben DiNucci feels like he's kind of playing hero ball now is because he feels like he doesn't have a consistent running game. And he's got to do everything himself. And he really shouldn't feel that way, because he's got great receivers. He's got a great running back. He's got a solid offensive line. He just needs to trust his players around him more. And I think June Jones needs to set the tone by running the ball more and giving the ball to Morgan Ellison. Hopefully now that he's had a little more time to rest and he's getting a little bit healthier, they'll be able to lean on him for the second half of the season and really run the ball. I know June Jones' style is to sling it around as much as he can, but he's got to trust Ellison. This guy is really good. Could potentially be one of the best running backs in this league, but I think June Jones is kind of holding him back from it, with his play calling.
Oh, and Chris, one more thing real quick, Sam. I know you want to hop in there. I blame that interception, the Josh Gordon one, on Ben DiNucci as well, because even if Josh Gordon had ran a fly pattern, it was still about 5 yards too far over his head, because Josh Gordon is not that fast. So I still blame it on DiNucci.
That's fair. I mean, he's in his mid-30s at this point, so I don't think he's the burner he once was early in his career. So moving on to the next game, we had DC up against St. Louis, against another packed house, despite the fact that St. Louis had some competition for gameplay this week. So let's start with Anthony. Anthony, what are your thoughts on this game? Let's start with the crowd. What did you think of the 35,000 attendance?
Really impressive that they were able to get over 30,000 fans again. It's pretty clear that the league is going to be leaning on the St. Louis market to really carry the XFL in attendance. And it's great to see the city kind of back them up. I know that's a city that's gone through a lot when it came down to losing the Rams to LA. So I know they've been waiting a long time to have a full football team back. They were excited to have the Battlehawks 3 years ago, but they were not hitting the attendance numbers that they're hitting now, which has probably been the one thing we can talk about with the massive improvement has been just St. Louis and how they're backing their team. It's really incredible to see. So love the crowd, love seeing it. I think the problem is St. Louis, their kryptonite is the DC defenders. And simply put, DC has a great running game. Abram Smith absolutely tore them apart, 218 yards on the ground, 3 touchdowns. He had an incredible game. He had a 62-yarder and a 70-yard touchdown run. He was able to come up with big plays when they needed to. That's a DC team that's very weird, and that the passing game doesn't really need to be that good. They just need to get 150, 170 yards passing, because the running game is going to take care of everything else. So I thought DC did really well running the ball. They did well on defense. I don't think AJ McCarron had a horrible game. He's had better games, but I thought he did pretty well until the very end, where he threw the pick to Michael Joseph, which, I mean, Michael Joseph's been spectacular this year. Probably one of the best DBs in the league, and maybe one of the best defensive players in the XFL. So it's been great to see what he's been doing for DC. This is DC right now, to me, looks like the clear-cut favorite to win the XFL title, and it's because of what they can, because championship teams know how to run the ball and they know how to play defense, and DC is very good at both. Reggie Barlow deserves a lot of credit. I widely underestimated this team going into the season. I didn't really see him as a threat, and Reggie Barlow's put together a hell of a team. So I think DC overall, really good game. St. Louis had some good moments. Darius Shepard is obviously a great returner. He's a very dynamic player as well as a good receiver. Again, I thought AJ McCarron had a good game. Brian Hill had a good game on the ground. I think he had like 79 yards on the ground. So overall, it was a competitive game. St. Louis is going to be in it to the very end of the season to battle for the playoff spot. But I think DC really proved that they're the top team in this league right now.
I would say it's very hard to argue that. Michael, you want to go ahead?
Well, I think that this game is a testament to just how good St. Louis is, as much as it is how good DC is. Because this is the second game in a row now where, well, the second game that St. Louis has played against DC now, where DC's kind of dominated most of the game. And to be honest with you, even though St. Louis tied it in the first game, it never felt like DC was out of control. Even though St. Louis closed the gap here in this game, it didn't feel like DC was out of control. So that's where I get off saying that DC kind of dominated this game, because even though it got to that point, it didn't feel like DC was ever in trouble. And a lot of that is because it's just the run game, that defense, you just don't know where the pressure's coming from. You know, whether it's Davin Bellamy on one side, the interior tackle, or Reggie Northrup coming up the middle, or a safety blitz. Like Greg Williams has done such a fantastic job, and it's his years in the NFL between a head coach and being on defense, that he's done such a fantastic job of being able to mask a lot of where his pressure is going to come from. And then Michael Joseph, like, you know, Anthony said, might be one of the best overall players. Yeah, right. And I'm just kidding, Matt. DC fan. But you know, Michael Joseph might be one of the best defensive players in the league. So I think that this has definitely made DC the clear-cut favorite, because to me, St. Louis is the second best team in the league. And now you've, you know, kind of controlled and dominated them for two straight, you know, games, or, you know, both games that they played. DC does need to be tested, though. I'm worried that they're going to go in thinking it's going to be, you know, a cakewalk, or I don't know. Reggie Barlow has done a good job of humbling these guys, and Jordan Tiamu and De'Aaron King have a very good relationship. So it's very possible that they don't let that happen, but we have seen it too many times with teams that they kind of just get into this mode, and all of a sudden they let the guard down just slightly, and a team slides in there, and we'll see what happens.
That's fair. Krish, what was your thoughts on these games?
What's up, Matt? I see you're watching. What's up? Anyway, so we get into this game, right? And St. Louis, they run a lot of, what is that route called where you go like straight? It's a dig route, I think. We call it slants in Madden, but it's like it's a dig concept. It's where they just run like near the outline, and that's all they were running. Like Hakeem, I love Hakeem Butler. I think he's a really good receiver. But I also think that they rely on him way too much. You know, they got to start spreading the ball around if they want to win games against top-tier teams like DC. I mean, at the end of the day, DC is probably, in my opinion, the best team in the league right now. It's Houston or DC. I think Houston might be slightly better than DC. I know you hate to hear that, Michael, but like just by a hair. You know, I want to thank Michael. He gave me some betting advice. Only $38 this week. You know, so I was able to pay my bills, but it was good. I mean, the over hit 42.5. Like, that's so low. That was a free one from Vegas. But I think De'Aaron King had a great game rushing. Teamu has really, really stepped up. You know, from the first week to now, he's really established himself as a pro-style passer. And that is awesome to see. You know, and him getting out of the pocket, running, taking big hits. He took a couple of big hits where I thought he was going to go out of the game for a sec. He stayed in there. Eric Dungy playing his role on special teams. Like, this team all around is great. Like you said with Greg Williams, I mean, I cannot believe he's coaching this league. I really cannot. When I saw that name, I was like, oh, my God. Like, this is an NFL level, not defensive coordinator, head coach. You know, I think if the whole Bounty Gate scandal didn't hit, I think he would be a head coach in the league. But I also think that Reggie Barlow, like you said, is doing a great job. I think this DC team is a team to be reckoned with, to be honest.
100%. Krish, I know you got to get out of here soon, so thanks for joining us, man. Have a great night. We appreciate your takes, as always.
All right, have a good night.
Moving on to the next game, we had Orlando and Vegas, a battle of the defeated teams. and Vegas barely squeaked this one out by 3 points. Anthony, were you surprised to see this one be as close as it was?
Honestly, I think it was one of the best games of the season. I knew it was going to be close. I didn't think it was going to have the scoring it was. It ended up being the highest scoring game of the season. And I think the even more surprising part is I think this may be the best story of the season. Quinten Domady, all the crap he had to put up with the whole scandal of him giving plays away to other teams and that investigation from the XFL and the law firm. Like he went through a lot of stuff over the last few weeks, and to finally get exonerated for it and be able to be active and to jump in there, go 22 of 25, over 200 yards, 2 touchdowns and no picks. That's incredible for all he went through. I think it's one of the feel good stories of the season, even though they didn't win the game. He was a big reason why they were in that game. So big credit to him, as well as Luis Perez. I mean, a lot of people said, "Oh, Brett Hundley's going to come in here, be the starting quarterback the whole season." Speculation he's the highest paid player in the XFL. Like this is why they brought him in. And I kept telling people like, slow your ropes. Luis Perez, he's good. Like he had a good season in the USFL last year with the Generals. He had a great game against Orlando this weekend, throwing for over 200 yards. I think he had like 2 or 3 touchdowns. I thought he had a really good performance too. So the quarterback play was really good. Obviously, the ugliness of the 2 false start penalties at the end of the game for Orlando is, quite frankly, one of the dumbest endings to a game I've ever seen out of football. I can't believe a team lost because of that. But, I mean, overall, it was an exciting game. There were big plays. The offenses were really clicking. I mean, obviously, you want to have a little bit better defensive play, but I think when you have 2 teams that are winless, you want to see a game where there's high scoring. So that ended up being one of the best games of the year. So kudos to both teams for really coming out there and playing hard.
I would agree. Michael, your thoughts?
Well, first and foremost, I want to shout out Quinten Domady because I mean he won me over as a fan. I mean, not only did he come in there and put up his stat line, but forget the stat line for a minute. It's the fact that he went in there and actually looked like he wanted to be there. He could have easily phoned it in. He could have easily just been like, you know what, screw this team. He stuck it out. He wanted to play. He got his chance out there, and he just never looked back. To me, this is his team moving forward. With that being said, even though the game was really exciting and the game was awesome to watch, I can't help but think that this might be a testament to just how bad both these teams are, as much as it is necessarily that they have the potential to be good. I hate to say it because you don't want to take anything away from what they did do, but these 2 defensively just have not been good. Like I've been giving credit to Vegas because they've been involved in games, but now I look back at the games that they were involved in. And we talked about Arlington. We'll talk about Arlington again, in the next game. Like, that's not so much impressive anymore, So, Vegas has some issues that they need to work out still. This was a game that I felt like Orlando might have had their best chance, but I think San Antonio might be another chance that they could also possibly grab a win against. But they made some changes on the coaching staff. We talked about it. Sam, in the chat before this, they made some changes on the coaching staff. So they're definitely trying to shore up a little bit of that defense. So maybe it will click for them. But I think they found their quarterback from this game for sure.
Absolutely. Just to refresh my memory, who got added? It was Vegas and Orlando that both had a team.
Yes. So Devin Bush Sr. has been added to the Orlando Guardians as the DB coach. Ty Warren is the D-line coach that's out. The linebacker coach over there is now going to be doing double duty. He's going to be doing defensive line and the linebacker. I can't remember his name. Mark Snyder. And then Vegas hired. I'm drawing a blank on what his name was.
Norton? No.
Yeah. No. Hold on. I have it right here in our chat. And pardon me, folks. I was just talking about it here. Mike Newton. Mike Newton, who he was previously with. He was previously with Robert Morris. He was just. It only said that he was just hired as an assistant. I don't know if it was just a assistant head coach, like he's going to be an assistant to Rod Woodson, or what his necessarily role is going to be. But I did want to mention something real quick. Jontre Kirkland is out for the remainder of the year with a chest injury for Houston, so that's a huge blow because he was definitely their like number 1 receiver. I meant to mention it when we were talking about Houston-Seattle game earlier. So
No worries. I knew we were going to get to that subject at one point or another. But on to the last game of the weekend, probably the biggest stinker of the weekend, in my personal opinion. San Antonio versus Arlington. Finally got to see some Reeds in that, but this game was terrible. I mean, it ended up 12-10, Arlington winning the game. Kyle Sloter was 14 of 26 for 148 yards. 5.7 yard average. So right back to that dink and dunk offense that we hate so much. And then over on the San Antonio side, Jack Cohn had 2 interceptions before he got pulled, less than 50% completion rate, 2.8 yard average. And then Reed Sinnett came in and looked decent, but he still threw an interception, only averaged 5.1 yards per attempt. So yet again, we're just watching an anemic passing attack on both sides of the ball. Anthony, what were your thoughts on this game and Reed Sinnett finally getting to play?
I mean, being the reporter for the Renegades, sometimes it's hard covering this team because you watch this offense, and I will say, if it's any consolation, it was still better than the Orlando Guardians game where it was 10-9. And I know people are talking smack on the offense, and yes, every bit of it is credited. But I will say this was the first time this year that the Renegades were able to eclipse over 250 yards of total offense. And in the last 3 games, they have improved their points with 10, 11, and 12. So there is little progress with this offense. But I will say, John Hayes, I think he's getting more comfortable with the play calling. I don't think he was very comfortable calling plays at the beginning of the season. He's being a little more creative with it, but I still think he's being really conservative with what he can do. And a lot of that has to do with, I know you can sling it around with Kyle Sloter, but Kyle Sloter is having similar issues to what he had last year in the USFL. He's a turnover machine. He turns the ball over a lot. And, I got a lot of flack for saying that Drew Plitt should be the guy staying in there, and you need to trust him a little more, despite him being a rookie. And I think you trust Drew Plitt a little more because he didn't turn the ball over as much. He wasn't accurate, and I think he still needs a lot of work as a rookie. But I mean, honestly, I haven't seen much out of Kyle Sloter either. I think the last couple of weeks he's been really inaccurate, making bad decisions with his passes. He's thrown 4 picks in 2 weeks. I mean, it's just the offense is really not clicking. Devion Smith and Kenneth Farrell have not lived up to expectations, so that running game has not been great, despite the fact that they were able to run it for over 100 yards on the offense, which is really encouraging to see because that's something they haven't really done. But this Renegades team is the worst offense, the worst offense, worst passing attack, worst rushing attack. They've scored less offensive touchdowns than any other team in the XFL. I mean, they could realistically be 5-0 if they just had a better offense because their defense is spectacular. I think they have one of the best defenses in the league, but they're not being backed up by their offense. And in terms of San Antonio, I mean, it's similar issues. Their offense is terrible. They have the second worst passing attack and the second worst rushing attack behind the Renegades. It's a shame because they have such a great running game. And Reed Sinnett, actually, I thought he looked really good. I mean, that offense looked a lot better with him than Jack Cohn. I don't know what happened to Jack Cohn. I thought he looked really solid the first couple weeks of the season, and he kind of dropped off. It almost looks like we're watching like Cardell Jones, what happened with him with DC 3 years ago, where he had a good first 2 weeks, and then it just fell apart. I feel like we're seeing the same thing with Jack Cohn, but now with Sinnett injured, he injured his foot in last night's game, so now it looks like Jack Cohn's probably going to end up having to be the guy, and I don't know if San Antonio can really bounce back from it. They're 1-4 right now, and they don't have the quarterback to really get it done. So I think Hines Ward's got a lot of work ahead of him with this offense.
I would agree. Michael, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm not going to touch on San Antonio because that's going to be, your favorite segment that you don't know is your favorite segment yet. But I do want to touch on Arlington and Anthony, I know you cover them and you do a wonderful job of covering them, but 11 points a game on offense is what this team is averaging for points. And it's awful. It's dreadful. It doesn't matter if it's Drew Plitt. Plitt turned the ball over. The thing with Plitt, though, is he's a rookie. So you kind of a little bit of expect that. But Kyle Sloter is a gunslinger. And one of the issues that's happening with this offense is there's no opportunities for Sloter to be Kyle Sloter. The offense does not suit him because it's so dink and dunk. Like Sam said, going in 5.7 yards per pass. It's awful. It's the most boring offense in the XFL right now, even more boring than San Antonio's. I'm not even going to lie. It's boring because you pretty much know what's coming. It's either going to be a 7-yard hook to Sal Cannella, or it's going to be a 5-yard in route to one of the receivers that I think nobody can name unless you cover the team. That's obviously an exaggeration, but it's Arlington's offense. Like, they had the best running back room on paper going into the season, and how you don't lean full-fledged into that is beyond me. Like, something about the way they drafted this team, it was almost like they just didn't match it up schematically. And it's caused huge issues because I think they made a mistake by going with Drew Plitt at the beginning of the year. I think they should have stuck with Kyle Sloter because it is Plitt's rookie year. Let him get acclimated. Don't throw him to the wolves right away. So I think that was a mistake to start off, because then if Sloter struggles, you can bring Plitt in. At that point in time, he's had a few weeks to look at this offense and get acclimated to it. You only have 30 days of camp, so it's not like you have like a 2-month, 2.5-month window, and there's no preseason games. So when you have a rookie quarterback like that, I think it's always better to be a little more conservative, especially since you brought in a guy like Sloter, who had some mild success with New Orleans last year at the USFL. Yeah, he turns the ball over, but he's a gunslinger. You have to lean into your players' strengths, and I feel like Arlington's doing the complete opposite. And it's just not matching up schematically, and it's showing on the scoreboard every week.
Well, I think a big problem too is I think the Renegades have the worst receiving core in the league. I think there's some guys in there that can actually do some stuff. Like I actually love Tyler Vaughns. I love Lawan Whittingham. I think those are both really good receivers that are underutilized in this offense. But the problem is there's just not a big play guy. Like Jordan Smallwood was supposed to be the big play guy, and what's he had, like 3-4 catches this year? Like he's been non-existent in this offense.
I think he's been inactive for 2 of the 5 weeks, I believe, too.
Yeah,
I don't know if he's dealing with an injury or not, but he's been inactive. He was inactive week 1 and week 3, I believe.
Yeah, so I mean that's part of the problem too, is they just don't have any big playmakers. They have good receivers. It's just there's no big play guy. Like Seattle's got Pearson and Josh Gordon. When you look at the Battlehawks, they got Hakeem Butler. Like they're the Renegades don't have anyone like that. They have Sal Cannella, who's a tight end, and he's a great tight end. He's, probably the second best tight end in the league behind Cody Lattimore, but he's not your big play guy. So that's part of the problem, is they don't have someone they can lean on. Plus, to talk about the running backs, yeah, they have the best running backs on paper, but the problem is Devion Smith and Kenneth Farrell are getting a little bit older. And I think
Farrell got hurt too this week too.
Yeah,
and he came in late. And he came in late too, didn't he?
Yeah. Well, he got cut.
I was saying cut him, right?
Yeah, they cut him before the season, and then they brought him back on. And I mean, he had some success against San Antonio, but now he's hurt. I'm sure they're going to try to if the injury's bad enough, they're probably going to bring back Adrian Killings onto the team, because he got cut to make room for Letty Brown. And I think Letty Brown's probably going to end up getting more carries than we think, just because Devion Smith and Kenneth Farrell have not been able to do anything on the ground. So I think they're going to have to do something about that running back position. This offense in general, the skill set is just not there to really support Kyle Sloter, to maybe give a little defense to the quarterbacks.
Yeah, it just schematically it's not working up. They don't lean into their playmakers' strengths at all.
That's fair, 100% fair. A couple points that Freddie made that I wanted to get out there. Vegas is 3 of 4 teams to play Vegas so far had their season high in offensive points against Vegas. So obviously some defensive issues there. And then also that was the first game where the loser had scored at least 30 points. So you could look at it as a good game. You could also look at it as just that poor defense played. So, but before we take any more time talking about last week, we brought Anthony here because he started a series, chronicling the players of the week that he's chosen. So I wanted to bring him on and have him talk about his players of the week this week. So Anthony, why don't you go ahead and give us your 3 players of the week?
Yeah, so I'm going to butcher the defense. So I'm just going to say in advance, I've been trying to practice Peter's last name. So I'm just going to go ahead and apologize in advance. I'm going to Vegas Vipers. I named defensive player of the week. He had 5 tackles, 3 sacks, 4 tackles for a loss, and 1 forced fumble. He was a beast off the edge, being able to apply pressure on the quarterback. He had the biggest play of the game towards the end, where the Guardians were trying to go for the 4th and 15 onside conversion, and he's able to get in there and force a fumble to really cause havoc on that play. So really, without him, I mean, that set Orlando up with, they were backed up in their own position because of his big play there. So I thought he had a spectacular game against Orlando. So I named him my defensive player of the week. Offensive player, Abram Smith, and I don't even think it was close with anybody else, because I thought the defenses played a lot better this weekend as units. But Abram Smith was spectacular against St. Louis. 218 yards rushing, 3 touchdowns, had 2 runs of over 60-plus yards for TDs. So I thought he had a spectacular game. So I have player of the week. And for special teams, second time in 3 weeks that I've named Darius Shepard the special teams player of the week. He had that 80-yard kickoff return that set up the field goal at the beginning of the second half for St. Louis. He's been spectacular. Unfortunately, the 2 times he's had big kickoff returns was against DC, and they lost both of those games, but they were able to always get points off of them. So Darius Shepard is this close to just breaking loose on a kickoff return for a touchdown. And not only that, he's great on offense. I mean, he's really stepped up the last few weeks at receiver, especially with Marcel Aitman injured. They kind of had to have him elevate a bit, and he's been really good as a wide receiver. He's one of their leading receivers, as well as probably the best returner in the XFL. So he's made a major impact there on special teams.
Yeah, I think it'd be really hard to argue with anybody but Darius Shepard for the special teams player of the week. I mean, he's been unbelievable on kick returns right now. I don't think there's anybody much better than him in the league currently. But some great picks for sure. And if anybody wanted to check out that article, it's up on xflnewshub.com right now. Great content as per usual. And if you want to follow him on Twitter, it is by Anthony Miller on Twitter. So definitely look at all of his great articles. You cover Arlington, and who's your USFL team?
Houston Gamblers.
That's right. My fault. My mistake.
No.
So also Houston. So definitely thank you for joining us. You're more than welcome to stick around if you want to. If not, you're more than welcome to jet. We are going to open this up with the That Don't Impress Me Much segment of the night. So we'll get right into that.
Thanks, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
Have a great night.
So last week when I did this segment, I failed to mention that my reasoning for picking Jack Cohn also was because of the fact that he was yelling at the offensive coordinator and the offensive line on the sideline before he was doing that from a fan in the stadium. Or it was Jack Cohn last week, right? I did pick.
Jack Cohn.
It's been San Antonio. Okay, this week I picked.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right.
It was San Antonio, right? Okay, all right. This week I'm picking the San Antonio Brahmas coaching staff. It feels like I'm beating up on San Antonio, but this is where I have an issue with why this team is struggling in 1-4 right now. So Jack Cohn last week struggled immensely. You made a few changes. You demoted your offensive coordinator. You changed offensive coordinators, and then you changed the starting quarterbacks, and you brought Reed Sinnett in. Reed Sinnett comes out, first drive ends in a punt, second drive ends in a touchdown. Your offense looks real good. Third drive was a punt, but it wasn't a 3-and-out. And then all of a sudden, randomly, you put Jack Cohn in. Why? Why was Jack Cohn back in that game? Reed Sinnett had not played poorly at that point. Yes, there was 2 punts out of 3 drives, but if you're going to use the measuring stick, that 3 drives is where you're going to see enough of a quarterback that you're going to put Jack Cohn back in the game, then why wasn't Reed Sinnett playing in the first 4 weeks? Because this is the issue. The reason you are 1-4, and it's not, and I hate to say because I love Hines Ward as a player, and I'm sure that he's probably a fantastic coach, like in practice, and I know that he's a rookie head coach, but these are the types of decisions that will sink a season. Jack Cohn should not have been anywhere near that game until Reed Sinnett got hurt. Or if Reed Sinnett had even gotten hurt. Because who knows at that point in time in the second half that Sinnett could have easily been in rhythm. and maybe would have felt that pressure a little bit more, so he wasn't backpedaling when he threw that pick, because he threw the pick on the same play he got hurt. This is the coaching staff's fault. You lost that game against Arlington, a very winnable game, because you decided to take Reed Sinnett out at a time that he did not need to come out of the game. So, San Antonio, the coaching staff, you deserve to lose that game. I hate to say it, but that don't impress me much.
All right, we got one more special guest for the evening, and that is Freddie Airmail of Freddie Stat Go. This show promoted and distributed by FCF. It's Fan Network, correct?
It's a fan-controlled TV. Yes.
Oh, there you go. Sorry about that.
Yep.
Okay, so tonight, as you know, we're bringing you on because you're the quarterback expert. So we wanted to talk about some of these rookies that got drafted, as well as our guy Harrison Frost out in Seattle. Where do these guys rank for you, and who encourages you the most, I guess?
Sure. Are we talking where they rank, like within their respective QB rooms, or just like amongst each other, or what are we talking here?
That's a great question. So do we rank them as spring league quarterbacks in general, XFL and USFL together? Yeah, let's do that if you don't mind.
Do a lot of things.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways to slice this. Let's put it this way: who's your favorite of the rookies so far?
I've been kind of torn between a few different guys. I think Malik Cunningham presents the best option to end up in the NFL rather than USFL, especially because of his comments at the combine about not wanting to be in the USFL. He wants to focus on the NFL. So if we were talking that, I think that would be he'd be on top. I think Lindsey Scott Jr. presents as a great story. He's been all around. He played at a bunch of different schools and did okay for most of his college career if he was playing. And then in his 7th season, when he transferred over to Incarnate Word, he set I believe the all-division record for touchdowns responsible for in a season, with 60 passing touchdowns and 11 rushing. And so I think he presents as an exciting option for the Pittsburgh Maulers. You just what we would be cautious of in that situation is, was that more of a product of the system he was in, or is it really that he took the next step in his football play? I think one of the more sleeper options is Chase Bryce to the Houston Gamblers. He's been around to a few different schools as well. And actually all these guys, I believe, they were not guys who, they spent 3 years in college and then declared for the NFL draft and then got picked up by these USFL teams. They all exhausted their college eligibility. So they're all guys who don't have that option to go back to college. That it was, they go pro some way, or they end their careers, or, and so I think Chase Bryce presents as an interesting option. He was with Clemson for a couple of years, wasn't quite what they needed, ended up transferring out to Duke and had a really bad year in the COVID season. And then he transferred to App State and had a couple pretty good seasons, a couple underratedly good seasons. And App State this year, they took kind of a step back from where they've been the last couple of years. They went 6-6 and were not bowl eligible, but the problem for them was honestly mostly on their defense. The offense, for the most part, stayed at the same level that it had been the last couple of years, where they were contending for Sun Belt Conference titles. And so I'd say Cunningham, Scott, and Bryce are my top guys out of this group of 6.
Hey, Freddie, I got a question to ask you about Lindsey Scott, because you said he came from Incarnate Word.
Yeah, that's right.
Did he transfer in, or did he back up Cam Ward? Because wasn't Cam Ward at Incarnate Word before he transferred to Washington State?
Cam Ward was at Incarnate Word, and then he transferred to Washington State. This was Lindsey Scott's only season at Incarnate Word. He transferred in from Nichols.
Nichols. Okay, that's right. That's what I thought. I was trying to remember
Mhm.
what the school was that he transferred into. So,
Yeah.
and they
He
lost their head coach too. So I don't know if
yeah.
maybe was there a Nichols State connection for
Um,
coaching?
I don't think there was I don't think it was the head coach. I
Okay.
don't think.
All right. I
Uh,
was just curious because
yeah.
he had a really good year. I just didn't know if he had backed up Cam Ward and then took over, or if he had transferred in. But
Yeah, he didn't, but I think they were in the same conference at that point, and so maybe he would have seen how things looked over there, and uh, that's definitely one way to recruit a guy to your team is to go beat him as on the field with your team. Um, and so yeah, he had this one really great season at Incarnate Word. It was his fifth school, as I said. He started out at LSU, uh, left after a year after Les Miles was fired. So that kind of gives you a little bit more context for just how long he's been in college. He transferred over to, I think, East Mississippi Community College. He had a pretty good season there. Then went over to Mizzou, didn't play there. Transferred over to Nichols for a couple seasons, and he was all right there. And then he just balled out at Incarnate Word this past year. And I think among the concerns that you could have for him are not just that he had this one really great season, and you want to make sure that it's not just a flash in the pan, it's not just a product of playing in a more offensive-oriented system, but that's really him taking that next step. Um, he's also a bit smaller as far as quarterbacks go. I believe he's like 5'10", 5'11". But he's still on the very top of my big quarterback list that Sam and I have talked about a couple times. And I have a few different algorithms running over there, and I think the only one that he doesn't that he's in second in, for one thing, is that's one that includes height and weight as part of the calculation, and so he's getting a little bit dinged for that. It's also accounting for level of play. So he played FCS. The guy ahead of him is being documented as a Power 5 quarterback, so he's getting kind of bonus points for that. But I think, hey, what's up?
What's up, Seth?
But I think with the Maulers just revamping their entire quarterback room and their entire a lot of what they have going on over there, I think if he ends up going there and the season starts a couple weeks before the NFL draft, he'll probably be looking for a chance in the NFL before he goes over to the USFL, I bet. But I think he could fit in pretty nicely. If he takes a chance on the USFL, I think he could maybe end up as one of their guys.
my one more question for you, Freddie. Here
Sure.
is for me is, did you incorporate anybody like Aquila Glass or Davis Cheek? Because technically, even though they were last year's class, they didn't really play at all, so it wouldn't really be considered. They're kind of a rookie heading into the year. Did you include them, or did you just keep them separate because they were a separate class?
I mean, if you're talking about like my big quarterbacks list, that's like a bunch of different guys that are. The main thing in there is looking at guys that I think that either are playing in or could possibly be interested in playing in a league other than the NFL. So XFL, USFL, the indoor leagues, stuff like that. And so
Okay.
Cale Glass and Davis Cheek have been on there for quite some time. They are, and I could pull up their stats real quick and where they fall in that.
Well, I know Aquila Glass played fantastically at Alabama A&M. I just was curious if you lumped them in with the rookie class this year because they didn't really do much, didn't really play at all, and they weren't part of the spring league last year at all. So I didn't know if you included them in as a rookie because, I mean, they technically are, even though they're not. That's why I was wondering.
Right. When Sam approached me about doing this little segment here, he was mainly focusing on the 5 guys who were drafted and Harrison Frost in the XFL.
My fault.
But for all intents and purposes, I think
It's perfectly fine. I was just curious. I just
Oh, yeah.
didn't know if it was something that was brought in or not, because I feel like out of the 5 guys that were drafted for the USFL, I feel like 4 of them, 3 of them, maybe 4 of them will have a legitimate offer if they don't get drafted to be a
Mhm.
camp arm. I don't know if any of the 5 are necessarily going to jump in right away. Lindsey Scott was actually on my list as the highest potential guy to probably just jump into the USFL.
Mhm.
But out of the other 4 that were drafted in that sense, I think they're going to end up in a camp as undrafted guys, kind of like Carson Strong and Nicole Glass did last year.
Mhm.
But by the time the regular season hits, I'm sure they'll be free agents, maybe on a practice squad somewhere.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And those guys like Jake and Glass, for all intents and purposes, should be considered part of this sort of USFL rookie class because they don't have, you know, real NFL experience to this point. So they're basically coming in with, I'd say, right around the same level as these guys.
That's completely fair. Completely fair on both points for sure. So with that being said, do you have any more thoughts? Oh, actually, I wanted to ask you about Harrison Frost. Where does he rank in terms of the rookie class with the USFL? Would you put him at the top, in the middle? Where would he rank?
I think I'd have to put him near the back, and that's no slight against him. I just think it's because of the timing of the seasons, because the XFL starts right after the Super Bowl and the USFL has, a season that is further back on the calendar. It presents the option where if you're drafted onto a USFL team and you're holding out for the NFL draft, you can do that. And if you don't get picked and you want an opportunity right now, you can go over to your USFL team and your team will be playing and you'll have a chance to get in there right away. If you are holding out for the NFL draft, you're probably not going to be looking really at the XFL all that much in terms of. I think maybe if you were looking to boost your draft stock by continuing to play, that's kind of a high risk, high reward situation because you could end up getting hurt and that could absolutely uh, tank your draft stock, especially if you are in a situation where you are looking to boost it. You have something real big to gain from that. And so I think that might have been what attracted Harrison Frost to the opportunity. But it would be really interesting to see him, end up competing for the Sea Dragons because they have Ben DiNucci, who's been putting up big yardage numbers, but he's also proven to be a bit turnover prone. And so I don't know if they're really looking to make a change on that front, but um, there's a lot to consider there, honestly.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree. I mean, there's still the possibility that some of these guys that were drafted by the USFL come in and start, and we never know. So things could change quite a bit in just a couple months' time for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Well, with all that being said, we really appreciate you coming on. If you want, you're more than welcome to stick around for the preview and prediction series, which we're about to get into, or you're more than welcome to take off and have a great rest of your night. It's completely up to you.
If you'll have me, I'd be happy to stick around. I have nothing else going on tonight.
Sounds great. We definitely will be happy to have you. So with that being said, let's go ahead and move right into the next week. The first game of the weekend for Saturday at 1 p.m. Eastern is Seattle at Orlando. Let's start with Freddie. Freddie, what are your thoughts on this game? Who do you think ultimately wins this one?
So for those who don't know, in addition to my quarterback stuff, I also do computer ratings for teams in all kinds of different leagues. I have a system that transfers real well to just about any league once you get enough games played and you get everyone connected by common opponents. And so 5 weeks in, we are more than well connected enough to have a good picture of what's going on there. And if I turn over there, it projects Seattle to be victorious over Orlando by about 15 points. Um, which I'm tempted to say Orlando covers on that one because I think Seattle might be a little bit boosted by a big win over Houston that they might not be able to repeat if you gave them that matchup over again. Maybe they would with Kirkland out for the rest of the season. But I think maybe their rating is a little bit inflated, and I think Orlando is trending in the right direction with their offense, especially. They still have probably some questions on defense, but if they hand the reins over to Dormady for as long as he will take them, I still think Seattle wins, but I think it might surprise people if it ends up being close.
Do you have a score prediction?
I don't have numbers for both teams, but I'll say Seattle by 10.
Gotcha. Michael, what are your thoughts on this one?
This is a trap game for various reasons for Seattle. Coming off a huge win against Houston, emotional roller coaster. They put a lot into it. They wanted to show that they could that they belong. Orlando is obviously reeling. They're winless, but they put up 32 with the switch to Quinten Domady, who looked absolutely fantastic. And I know, again, it's Vegas, which I think Freddie touched on earlier about how bad that defense has been. But it's a West Coast team flying to the East Coast. I know that they're in Texas usually, so maybe they're flying from Texas. It may not be so bad, but it's still one of those situations where anytime there's a team traveling from the West to the East, it's usually not a great outcome for the team on the West, no matter who they're playing. They're both kind of in the same boat, I get, because they're both coming from Arlington, but who knows what that could do to a team like Seattle. It is a trap game, but I think Seattle ekes this out. I think Seattle is going to squeak it out 26-22. But this game might be impressive, and I would not be, and I will say it on record right now, I will not be surprised if Orlando does win this game.
Okay.
If I could say one thing before we move on. The last game, Orlando at Vegas, the crowd was 6,000 people officially, maybe less. The crowd was basically a non-factor, it seemed, in that game. And so that might explain part of what helped Orlando to really get stuff going. It'll be interesting to see what they can do with the crowd being a factor and being a factor on their side. They have this 3-game homestand going. Maybe now that they've got Dormady in there, that motivates the crowd to show up and, involve themselves, and maybe that ends up helping them.
That's a great point. Honestly, that's something that I hadn't considered. But coming off of last week, if I'm an Orlando fan, I mean, I've found a little bit of hope that I needed in my team to, go forward with a little bit of excitement. So yeah, why not show up and try and give them that little bit of edge that they need over Seattle, especially after you just watched them score 32 points. I mean, obviously they can put up points. It's just a matter of if they can do it against Seattle's defense now. In this particular game, I'm going to have to pick Seattle, even though DiNucci is turnover prone. I still do think they ultimately win the game. I'm going to say 22-15. But moving on to the next game at hand, we have St. Louis at Vegas. So you just spoke about the lack of a home field advantage for Vegas. Do you think that's going to be an issue again this week?
I think it could be, and I think it's a good opportunity for St. Louis to get things back on track after losing a couple against a division rival. I think I'd pick St. Louis pretty easily in this one. Computer says only by 7, and I'd take them to cover that, I believe. I think Vegas has shown plenty of struggles on defense. Like I said, 3 of the 4 teams that have played them have had their best offensive scoring performances against Vegas. One of them was Arlington. That's the only game that Arlington has gotten above 20 points so far this year. The only team that hasn't had their best scoring performance against them is DC. And I mean, you could write the one game off as being a rain game. It was a struggle for both of them. But also DC has kind of built up as the season has gone on, and they've really come into their own with that 2-quarterback system that they have going. And so, yeah, I'd expect St. Louis to win by at least double digits.
All right, Michael, what are your thoughts?
I feel bad for Vegas. I mean, this is a nightmare scenario for them. They come off their first win of the year against the bottom ranked team in Orlando in a shootout. You exhausted all of that, and you get an angry St. Louis team who is coming from their second loss to a division rival in DC, and St. Louis knows that they need this win with Seattle's victory last week over Houston. This very potentially could be a bloodbath. It could be very ugly. It could go the other way. I mean, Vegas may be riding high coming off their win that they. I'm fully expecting St. Louis to come in there and not make it be close. I'm gonna say 31-12 in this game.
Okay. Well, I would say that'd be a little bit of an outlier, given that St. Louis has only scored 28 points one time this season. They've only scored over 20 points one time, is what I meant to say. Sorry about that. But they haven't scored 30 points all season long. So, I mean, that would be kind of surprising to see. But I personally think that Vegas has a little bit better shot in this game than a lot of people are going to give them credit for. Obviously, they've got some defensive woes to work out. But I think St. Louis does too. Obviously, we just watched two different teams put up over 28 points on them and win the game because of it. So I think that's something that Vegas has proven that they can do as well. It's just a matter of if Luis Perez or Brett Hundley, whoever ends up starting this game, comes out firing like they did in this past week, and they can put together a performance like they did. Now, does that actually happen? I'm going to lean toward no as well, unfortunately. But I do think there's an opportunity for them to be very scrappy in this game and be in it till the very end, much like they've been in every other game. In this one, I think my score is going to be, let's say 28-26, St. Louis.
No Vegas bias in that at all. So 2 reasons primarily why I picked 31 is because, like Freddie said, the highest scoring of the season has been against Vegas. Did you say 3 times this year? 3 teams. And then on top of that, St. Louis got beat up by DC on the ground, which is the one thing that I think Vegas doesn't even know exists. I don't think they know what a running game is. So it's going to be a double-edged sword, I believe, because I think St. Louis' secondary is much, much better than Orlando's. So I don't think Vegas is going to be able to keep pace.
Oh, yeah, it's not even a question if Orlando's secondary is even in the same realm. But at the same time, we're St. Louis is sorry about that. But we're talking about the fact that, they still scored, 35 points in that game. And before that, they were still putting up 20-plus points versus every defense that they've played. So, I mean, I know they necessarily haven't played a murderer's row, but they played DC twice and they still scored 20-plus, right?
Yeah.
Oh, they scored 8-6 in the first game, and then I don't remember what the score of the second game was. I don't, off the top of my head, I don't remember.
Which one?
I don't think they scored over 20 in the second game. Did they in
Vegas
DC?
in DC?
Oh,
in
yeah.
DC, yeah.
32-18.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Never mind. I stand corrected.
The interesting thing is, I just went back and I checked. So it's Arlington, Orlando, and Seattle that have all had their highest scoring totals this year against Vegas. Seattle scored 30 against Vegas. Interestingly enough, Vegas's second highest scoring total on the year after this 35 that they just put up was against Seattle. at home, they put up 26. And so, I mean, that kind of adds to the sort of trap game notion that we're getting from that Orlando Seattle game. Maybe Orlando pulls off what Vegas couldn't.
That's very true. Maybe they do. What was the Vegas score on your prediction, Michael?
31-12.
Right.
We can up that. We can up that to 31-16. There, make it a little bit. Make it a little more.
Oh, we can't revise it now. It's too late.
Oh, can't revise it now. You already wrote it down. It's in writing. It's in stone. Okay.
Yeah. We typed it in the notepad. It is forever there.
Forever there.
So San Antonio versus Arlington. Kind of interesting how this all worked out. I mean, they played each other last week, and now they flip flop, and now they're playing each other again. It's kind of interesting how that works. But I kind of like it. It's similar to the CFL schedule this past year, where a lot of teams seem to play each other twice in 2 weeks, and they'd flip flop like that. So I kind of like it. It's kind of interesting. So with that game on the docket, what are your thoughts on this game, Freddie?
Why 2 weeks in a row? This matchup. Why? It's man. This is like it's going to be. I think it's going to be torture, just like the last one. Especially if Reed Sinnett is out for an extended period of time, and they have to turn to Cone, and maybe they make Juwan Pass active for I think his first game of the year, and I'd imagine they had to bring in another guy if it's a long-term thing for Sinnett. Maybe they re-sign Anthony Russo, who was one of their allocations. Maybe they trade for someone, or maybe they bring in a guy like Roland Rivers off free agency. I don't know. But yeah, I don't think any of those solutions would be a very quick spark for San Antonio. I have Arlington winning by 1 point, 1.13, and that sounds about right for their style of play so far. But it's interesting because that means that it's only picking Arlington over San Antonio because they're the home team. It's interesting that Arlington has had 3 close wins against generally inferior teams to start the season, and they're 3-2. But that still might be enough to get them into the playoffs. I have them at 5-5 on the season, and second place. But yeah, I think it's going to be Arlington in a close one. I'd say they do a little bit better than expected because San Antonio is struggling with the quarterback situation. Let's say Arlington by 4.
That's fair. Michael, what are your thoughts on this game?
Hopefully, I'm either watching the back of my eyelids, or maybe this game will help me fall asleep. What time is it? What time is it on? Probably midday, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Hold on a sec.
Oh God. Okay.
3 p.m. Eastern.
which means I'll end up watching the whole game.
Nice afternoon nap, it sounds like.
Oh man. Well, I'll end up watching the whole game. I'm being dramatic because that's what I do.
Yeah.
Arlington is averaging 11 points a game on offense, and I'm hammering that to death because guess what? They still haven't really cracked it. They scored 12 this week. Congratulations. The game against Vegas, the only reason why they scored 22 was because of 2 pick sixes involved in that game. So I mean, they scored 9 points on offense. San Antonio, if Reed Sinnett didn't get hurt and Reed Sinnett was going to be the starter, I would pick San Antonio in a heartbeat for this game. But Jack Cohn is, if he can't channel his inner Orlando when he played against Orlando a couple weeks ago and looked like he was sitting on top of the world, this game is going to be another one of those snooze fests of like 11-8. And 8 might be generous for whoever loses. I'm gonna pick Arlington to win just because I think their defense is better. but it's going to be like 11-8. That's going to be the score.
Okay. 11-8.
I'm manifesting, or whatever the kids call
Yeah.
it right now, a good
Yeah.
day for Cohen.
I will not pick Arlington's score to be over 11 until they actually do it on offense. I'm not doing it until they actually get. Okay, sorry, they scored 12, so over 12. I'm going to say over 15 just to be fair. Like
That is fair, because I was going to say 13-6.
10, 11, 12, 13. You're following the Anthony Miller.
Yeah, I'm hoping that the trend continues, and then that just makes for an easy prediction score this week. But moving on to the last game of the weekend, this one is going to be, in my personal opinion, probably a preview of the championship this season. So Houston at DC. DC's obviously got a pretty rambunctious crowd, you could say. They're very lively, so I definitely expect this to be a little bit of a home field advantage. Freddie, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I would say about the same. I have DC by 5.5, which it's interesting. I think Houston's going to be playing a bit mad, coming off the first loss in club history across the 2 seasons. Even though the players weren't, involved in that 2020 season, it's disappointing either way. And I do think Houston is easily the best team in a weak division. But I also think DC is easily the best team in the stronger division. I don't think there's really that much of a debate to be had at this point about that. Maybe Houston comes in and shows off some things that they haven't shown before, and maybe they pose a bit more of a threat than I'm expecting. But I think DC could end up running away with this one. You could end up with kind of a similar situation to what you had last week with Seattle, where they didn't really quite pull away, but it always felt like they were in control. And I'd say you could probably end up seeing a similar situation with DC here. I would take DC by I'd say 8.
Okay, that's definitely fair. Houston's defense might prove that to be wrong, but we'll see. Michael, what are your thoughts? And feel free to give all the DC bias.
DC's going to literally run away with this game. It's just the run game as a whole is just going to be so much for Houston. Like, Houston is such a finesse team, and they win against Seattle, who doesn't even have the best defense in the North, but has a very strong defense. Ron Zook's got them playing real well, and they got smacked in the mouth. That score 21-14 was not as close as it looked. I mean, Ben DiNucci threw 2 red zone picks. He was in the end zone. That could have easily been another 14 points or 12 points at minimum added to Seattle's score. So you factor in that's 33-14, and that last touchdown that Brandon Silvers threw was with a little over a minute left. So Houston never really stood a chance against Seattle. They absolutely got crushed, and Seattle was the 3rd best team, in my opinion, in that division. So you are looking at Houston entering the meat of their schedule, because I believe they go back and play St. Louis next week at home. So they are really coming through Gauntlet's row here, and I don't know if this team is going to be able to respond the way that people are expecting them to, because I think that people are harboring on the first 4 weeks and how good they looked, but that level of competition was not very strong. And Seattle kind of opened some eyes, and if it wasn't for some self-inflicted wounds, then that game isn't anywhere near as close as it looks in the box score. DC's defense is much better than Seattle's, and Greg Williams is going to have pressure coming up Houston. Houston's offensive line cracked under pressure last week. against Seattle. It was the first time we've seen cracks in that offensive line in 4 weeks, and it did not look good for Brandon Silvers. Brandon Silvers reverted back to Memphis Express AAF Brandon Silvers, where I was not impressed with him at all. So it's going to be interesting. If Houston could find a way to quell that, they could easily make this a game. But I just think the run game is going to be too much, even if they stack the box, for Houston to be able to kind of bounce back from. So I'm going to give this score a 27-15
Okay.
in favor of DC, in case you didn't notice.
I kind of figured. Oh, that's okay. I had already written down my.
Hey, I didn't pick DC last week, so I picked St. Louis last week. So I don't bias my ass.
Well, I mean, this game's a little bit different.
Of course it is.
But no, I personally already wrote down DC for my pick as well. I mean, I could sit here and you know, profess my love for their quarterback position once again, but I don't really need to. I think the whole world's seen it at this point that this is one of very few examples off the top of my head where a 2-quarterback system has not only been used well, but it's used to near perfection. It seems like they know exactly when to pull one quarterback and put the next one in. It hasn't really messed up either guy's rhythm. It's just unbelievable to watch. It's very similar to watching the Luis Perez and DeAndre Johnson a mixture last year with the Generals. That was, I thought, one of the best examples ever in my experience. And now here we are seeing it all over again, and honestly done better, quite honestly. So I'm picking DC in this game. I don't think it's going to be quite as big a blowout as you predicted. I'm thinking something like probably a 28-21 or 28-20 type game. I think Houston's going to stay in it till the very end, but DC is going to end up pulling it out with the run game. They're probably going to have the lead going into the fourth, and then it's going to be a situation where they're just pounding the rock and expecting Houston to stop them, and they won't be able to.
This is a game, Sam, where it could be one way or the other. It could end up being a DC controlled and 34-6, or you know, it could be a tight game where Houston even wins by like 1 or 2. You know, like it's very. We're not sure. It depends on how Houston responds. 100%. And I just don't think they're going to respond the way that most people are expecting them to. And I don't think it's because they're not capable of it. I think it's just because they're playing DC. Like right now, I think everybody can agree that DC is probably on the top of every power ranking. Every power ranking I've read for the last 24 hours has had DC number 1. So
it'd be extremely hard to argue with that at this point. I mean,
and if it were in Houston, it would be a toss-up for me. It would be a much different story.
Yeah, if they were in Houston, I think it would be more closer to the closer game aspect of it than it would be in DC. Like, I think Houston is getting gifted that they don't have to travel to St. Louis.
Yeah,
that's very fair. It's very fair. Just a quick rundown of how we did last week. Travis and Mark picked Seattle, so they got that one right. Moving on to the next game, Travis and Krish were the only ones who picked DC right. Travis picked Vegas right. Everybody but Mark picked Vegas right. Mark picked Orlando. And then it looks like Mark and Krish were the only two that picked Arlington.
I picked San Antonio.
Says that you picked San Antonio 22-10 apparently.
I didn't even really care that I went 1-3 because DC beat St. Louis, so that I didn't really give a shit if I went 1-3. To be honest with you.
It's funny because last week you and I both went 4-0, and this week we both went 1-3.
I think last week was a little bit more of a toss-up though, and then this week I think was a little bit more of a game could go either way, because if I remember correctly, Sam, I think in the Seattle game you and I both mentioned that game could go either way. And the DC St. Louis game, we both mentioned that game could go either way. And then I think in the Arlington San Antonio game, I think you mentioned that it could go either way. I wasn't as on the Arlington side because I was assuming that San Antonio was going to start Reedsonet and keep him in for the whole game. I still don't understand that 3 drives and pull him. It made zero sense to me.
Yeah.
I'm still baffled by it. Like, I still don't get it. So,
Well, to be fair, out of everybody, you were the only person who picked San Antonio or anybody to win that game by more than 3 points. Shockingly enough.
I was excited for Reedsonet.
That's
I
fair.
really I just thought that offense was going to respond to him with between his NFL experience and his leadership, especially like in the interviews on the sidelines. I just thought that team was going to respond to him, and it looked like they were going to. I mean, they went down. I mean, they marched on that second drive, you know, and for some reason you just put Jack Cohn in and just messed everything up. I didn't understand it.
I'm sure they would have. He's definitely a smart guy. He had Ivy League offers coming out of high school as a 1-year starter, only his senior year, and every time he'd get cut by an NFL team, he'd always end up right back on another team, and so it shows that they value him for something over there, and I think we started to see really why that was, and it's unfortunate that he's hurt now, and we don't really know where that's going.
I've never head coached on a professional level at all. I would just, so I don't want to say I know more than Hines Ward. I would just be very curious to ask Hines what the thought process was there, or even the offensive coordinator, because it made zero sense to me. You've already seen what you've had with Cohn for the first 4 weeks, and you're coming out 1-3. Like, I don't get. It's not like you're putting in Jawan Pass. You know, it wasn't like you were putting in like a Harrison Frost. You know, you were reverting to the same guy that got you to a 1-3 go about heading into week 5 anyways. So it just, to me, as somebody who has coached and understands it from a coaching perspective, but not on a professional level, it doesn't make sense to me. But I would love if somebody could give me a type of situations to maybe change my mind. But I just, at this point in time, I'm just going to remain baffled, I think.
There was a point where, they were 1-3 going into this game, but they had played 3 pretty good teams in those losses, and so there was kind of a point where it felt like maybe it's just they're kind of an okay team that just played real good teams and didn't do so well. They played, I think it was Seattle, St. Louis, and Houston. And now it's much harder to say that it was just that they were playing good teams and being an okay team.
I understand that, but I mean, if Jack Cohn had played good in those losses, and you were close, and Cohn was looking like a viable starter, then sure. But I don't think Cohn was viable except for maybe in 2 games this year where he played all right, and I just don't. I don't know. You have a chance. You had a chance to win this game against Arlington, knowing it's one of the worst offenses in football in the XFL, and you needed to win to stay in the playoff hunt, and you made the switch to start the game. Why not just stick with it? Like that. I guess that's just my brain.
No, yeah, I get that.
I'm with you. I personally don't understand the switch there at all. And at this point, if I'm San Antonio, I'm going to Jawan Pass. Even if I don't think he's ready at this point, what do you have to lose? I mean, you're pretty much out of the playoff race at this point. You're more or less playing for 2024. This is in our universe where we're already assuming XFL has a season 2. I mean, obviously a lot can change. We all know how this goes, but I definitely expect it to be a situation where Pass is going to be probably back in the XFL next season unless they cut him. So why not see what you have? So I mean, give it a shot. Worst case scenario, you lose some more games.
Yeah, it's not like you can lose more than one it's not like you can get more than one loss in a week. If they lose
Exactly.
badly, it's still only one loss.
I will say it's pretty crazy though, because if they beat Arlington here, they're only one game out, so that they still have a chance to sneak into this playoff spot. It's just that I don't have the trust in Jack Cohn.
Yeah.
So, and I think a lot of the fans and a lot of the people that have been following the XFL don't have that trust, so they're going to write them off. If they are able to beat Arlington, though, it may be very interesting to see the direction they go in, because I haven't heard anything about Reed Sinet's injury. So I don't know if it's for the year yet, or if it's just, maybe a tweak and he'll be good to go after next week. If you win and you're going into the next game and Reed's 100%, I think you have to start Reed personally.
Absolutely.
I kind of am rooting a little bit for San Antonio, because I think they have the best uniforms in the league, so they're kind of like my South team, and I'm very kind of hoping. But Arlington was like my preseason number one. It's really sad. I'm really it's saddening to see how far they have slid down my board. I think they're one of the bottom 3 teams in the league. I think Vegas is better than them. I have Vegas as my number 5. I have all 4 East teams in the top 5. I mean North teams in the top 5.
Crazy.
I can understand.
I would not have expected that.
Well, San Antonio and Arlington are the worst 2 offenses in football, and Orlando can't stop us 3. So, I mean,
that's a good point. That's a good point. And if you can't stop us, you got issues, because shoot, I can't even barely run at this point.
Do I look like I run? No.
I mentioned earlier that I had the Renegades projected at 5-5 on the season. After the weeks of 5, the results of 5 weeks, I have the Brahmas at 3-7 at this point, which is, I think they have another game against Orlando, and I think I have them. I guess I must have them projected to beat Vegas, which is far from a sure thing. But if San Antonio does flip this game against Arlington, and then everything else plays out as I'm saying, they're tied at 4-6, and one of them has to make the playoffs at that point.
But even with you having Arlington win this game, you even said that it's only 1.13, right? So I mean, it's not like it's 11 points or something.
Yeah, no.
It's so close.
It's
to
so
be honest with you,
and it depends on a lot of things that we don't know yet, like you said, the Sinet situation.
Yeah,
I think Sinet's the wild card to me.
100% he is. If he can go, you can't go any other direction there. And if he can't go, like I said, I'm going to Juwan Pass. I mean, they probably won't. They'll probably go right back to Cone, but in an alternate universe.
I get Arlington and San Antonio. I get wanting to see what you have with these rookie spring guys, because the whole goal is to try to see if you can get them back in the NFL. But I just feel like that I would have stuck with more of a veteran to start the year, because it's easier to switch to from a veteran to a rookie than it is a rookie to a veteran, in my opinion. So it's one of those things where if you have the opportunity, that's the best way to go it. And yes, you are correct. Juwan Pass has accuracy issues and struggles in the pocket, but the guy is an athlete.
Yes, and that's exactly
an athlete. He can make things happen, and just a little bit of patience and coaching can go a long way. We've seen it with some people. So you just never know. You have to be able to make sure that you know what you have, and especially in game time, because like Sam Howell, like I mentioned it earlier about the Washington Commanders in the NFL with Sam Howell, like he's a gamer. Yep. He may practice like absolute crap, but this dude is a gamer. North Carolina doesn't make a bowl game without him in his last year there. So he fell to the 5th because of that last year, but I honestly just was like, give him a shot, see what you have. There was nobody else on roster at the time for our team, so don't bring anybody in. Just go with the homegrown guy and see what you can get with him.
I would agree.
Same thing with Juwan Pass. just do it. If Sinet's not there, just play pass, see what you have with him. Because like you said, what's the worst case scenario? You lose one game because you're going to lose anyway. So
yeah, you just lost to Arlington last week. So what's the difference? Any final thoughts before we get out of here for the evening?
When it comes to the XFL, no, but I do want to mention something real quick. Green Bay Blizzard, stick with Jerome Johnson. Stick with him at the IFL level. I know it seems crazy, but watching that first half, if you haven't watched the first half, a lot of that is not his fault. Some of it was. Some of it was. I will admit some of it was. But he's young. What is he? He's a rookie this year for them, right? Or a second year guy?
So. Both the guys are, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, he's young. There's going to be growing mistakes, but he looked so much better than
Mailer.
Yeah, that's his name. I couldn't think of it earlier. He looks so much better than him. So, stick with Jerome Johnson, Green Bay. If you're listening, I don't know if you are or not, but yeah, DC is winning it all. That's right, baby. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens in Green Bay. I see them alternating those quarterbacks more of the season before they settle on anybody, but we'll see. They got a long season, so
probably. I had to get an IFL plug in there. Sorry, Sam. I know we talked about it earlier.
Okay. It's okay. Like I said, we would go all night if we talked IFL and indoor football as well. We've already been in here for an hour and a half, so
I didn't come into this end of the show having something to say, but I did want to give a shout out to the other side of things there. TJ Edwards, former fan-controlled football quarterback, 6 rushing touchdowns in that game. Yep. I didn't get to watch, but I mean that's impressive.
You didn't miss much.
See it or not, I have to assume.
He balled out for sure, and that's the beauty of IFL games. For anybody who's watching this now, if you didn't get a chance to catch the game, it is available on YouTube right now. You can go watch it. So definitely make sure you go check that out. TJ Edwards played really well. He's personally my number 1 quarterback in the league, but I'm a little biased. I love TJ Edwards. So
you never let bias get into your analysis, though, Sam.
Not
ever. You never do.
A shout out when I was filming or when I was recording the latest episode of my podcast earlier today. That might be out by now. It should be out. We've been trying to release on Mondays.
Gotcha.
Podcast again is Freddy Stat Go on Fan Controlled TV on Spotify or anywhere else you get your podcast. This episode was the second part of our 3-part series on quarterback ratings for the NFL 2022 season. We got into kind of the middle range guys this time, and next week we will have the final part, and then we'll be taking a bit of a break. We're kind of saying that this has been our season 1 of the podcast, and then we're going to be off for probably a while. My co-host and I are going to be, focusing on other stuff, refreshing ourselves, and just making sure that when we get back to it, that we are really giving it our all.
There you go.
Oh yeah, Trayvon Boykin is also in the LFA down there in Mexico. If you're a Trayvon Boykin fan, or if you recognize the name from TCU,
as is Terrence Williams.
Terrence Williams, he scored a touchdown this past weekend too. Check them out. If you don't understand Spanish, I suggest just watching the game on mute. You can probably just do your own play-by-play at that point. There is no English subtitle option, unfortunately. I tried because I don't mind reading. I can do it. So, but there is no option. So, but it's solid football. I wouldn't go out of my way to be like, it's amazing football, but it's solid football.
It's worth watching for sure. I give it the time of day.
There's some good games for sure.
100%.
And they're definitely trying to build themselves up with this influx of American talent, which might be sort of the spark that they need to really take it to the next level with their own talent.
They absorbed the FAM or some of their teams this year, right?
They did absorb some of the teams, yeah.
Yeah, they did.
They're at 10 teams now, and they had 7 last year.
Yep.
Solid progression.
It's like the ELF. They promoted up to 18. They got 18 teams this year. So
17 now.
17. That's
Istanbul
right.
pulled
Because
out,
Istanbul pulled out. That's right. 17. Sorry.
Good job.
Alrighty. Well, with all that being said, before we start on another rant about the German football league, we'll cut it right there and leave you guys with this slight commercial.
This is Brett, and you're watching Shady Sports Network. Tune in, hit that like button.
You might wonder, what do these guys do? Player signing announcements.
I never in a million years thought you would actually come on to break this news. So without further ado, go ahead and tell everybody what happened today.
Yeah, man. I just had a workout with the Cincinnati Bengals. Signing me right out.
Without further ado, I'd like to announce that, I'll be taking my talents to Salina Liberty.
This just in, the Major League of Football is reportedly collapsing, unable to pay hotel room bills, with players being kicked out of their rooms and hotel managers asking them to leave voluntarily without issue.
And then we got Lions wide receiver Williams is debuting this week as a starter. That's something to look at as far as the eye test goes. And then another one on the eye test is Mostert might be coming back to Miami. And we can see if he has a role in this offense and see if he can be viable for the next couple weeks coming and help us in the playoffs and possibly towards a championship. That would be very nice because he's sitting on my bench right now.